My name is Erin Wallace. I am currently the project manager of the StayWell program. I am a white female with highlighted blonde hair, blue eyes, and I am wearing a black and white patterned floral type shirt and with you today. So I'm very excited to be with you. One thing that I would love and that you've already started doing is really sharing and joining in with the conversation today. I can tell you a lot of different things, but what I'm really looking for is to have a conversation with all of you and really looking to engage with you all today. I have been with the StayWell program since June of 2020, and we'll talk a little bit about what the StayWell program is. But I've spent the last 20 years of my career really working with individuals that are living with different types of disabilities. I've done a lot of work with individuals that are living with neurocognitive change, so different types of dementias that folks may be living with. And one area that I think that we always come back to is loneliness and feelings of loneliness. And so when meeting with Pam and kind of talking through what to share with you all today, loneliness was certainly an area that's really been highlighted throughout the pandemic. And so I'm excited to be able to share with you throughout that. If you have questions, I encourage you to ask them throughout. You can use the chat or you can unmute yourself. And I'll do my best to answer those questions as we're going through the content today. If I didn't get to it, I will always share my email and really encourage you to reach out and we can have a separate conversation that way. So in the next hour and 15 minutes, this is what I'm hoping that we'll cover together today. We're going to talk about what the 7 dimensions of wellness are, and we'll look at different ways of defining loneliness, and then we'll turn and really focus on how does that loneliness impact us? In what ways are we seeing that loneliness is really affecting us as a whole? And then we'll look at ways that how we can push through these feelings. So I'll give you some strategies in ways that you can help to push back at those feelings of loneliness and looking at some different ways to take action. We'll talk about something called reentry anxiety and how to move through that, and really looking at ways to find comfort in being social again. And then I'll share with you a takeaway activity that you can do. Before we really begin though, and really jump into the meat of this presentation, I'd like to share a little bit more about the program that I work with every day, and it's called the StayWell program. It's been in place since April of 2020, and it was instituted as a result of the pandemic being declared a disaster. And so there are some folks at the state of Michigan that applied for this grant. And really what we're here to do is to help people cope with the anxiety and or the distress that the COVID-19 pandemic has or is causing you. So we want you to know that it's okay to not be okay right now, and that all of the emotions that you've had since the pandemic began, these are normal, and that others may be experiencing something very similar to you as well. Some ways that the StayWell program wants to help is that we have a counseling line that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the phone number is actually listed here on this slide. And really want to encourage folks to reach out and to call when you're feeling lonely or you're wanting to have an additional connection with someone. Maybe you're feeling very frustrated, stressed, depressed, etc. And want to encourage folks to be able to call. Now, I know that you have the Peer Warm line as well, and the StayWell counseling line is just another option for you to be able to use and or share with those that you're supporting. I do want to mention that this counseling line is completely free of charge and it's totally confidential. So you're able to really call and talk and share with someone. We see individuals, or we hear about individuals that are calling and using this service on a daily basis. We also know that some individuals will call, once in every a great while, and you can talk for as long or as little as you may like. We also offer presentations to the public, similar to the one that I'm giving today. We offer free online discussion groups as well as printed materials, and we have some cool new stickers and magnets and different items that are free to give out to folks, and those will be updated on our website soon. So just a little bit more about the background of the program that is giving you this presentation today. So let's jump in here. When we think about wellness and health, there's really more to this than just one area. We aren't healthy or achieving wellness if we only exercise, but we don't have a good diet that goes along with it, or we're ignoring some of our emotional aspects of health, or maybe we're ignoring the social aspects or dimensions of health. But we know that when it comes to achieving wellness, there's so much more to it when we're looking at both health and wellness, and it's really multidimensional, and it includes these 7 dimensions of health. So when we look at our physical well-being, we really look at nourishing our body through exercise, through nutrition, as well as sleep. The emotional aspects are really being aware of and accepting and expressing our feelings and understanding the feelings of others. When we look at the intellectual dimension, really what we're seeing here is being able to engage with the world through learning, through problem solving, through different aspects of creativity. The spiritual dimension really is kind of that searching for meaning and higher purpose in our human existence. The environmental aspect is really having that positive relationship between environmental health as well as our own actions, our choices, as well as our well-being. When we look at the social dimension, it's really connecting and engaging with others and our communities really in meaningful ways. And then lastly is occupational. And so that means that our work is really aligning with our core values, and that it's supportive to us and not causing us harm or profound distress. And so each one of these dimensions are a part of your own quality of life. And if an area is neglected, if one of these dimensions are neglected for a period of time, what you may see is a negative effect to your overall health and well-being. So today we're really going to hone in on loneliness and how this can factor into your overall well-being within all 7 of these dimensions of health. So I'd like to start really by talking about loneliness and want to hear from you on this. So when you hear that word lonely or loneliness, what does this mean to you? Feel free to post something into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share verbally if you're comfortable with that. Great, feeling disconnected. Is there another item or another way that when you think about loneliness, what you think about, what you feel? Feeling. Go ahead.
No, little support or
Support. Yeah, little support. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a couple other items that were posted here in the chat. So feeling empty or feeling alone, isolated. Good. Are there other ways or other things that you think about when you hear the word lonely or loneliness?
Nobody to talk to.
Nobody to talk to. Mm-hmm. Really kind of feeling that kind of goes along with what Becky shared with feeling alone and isolated.
The only one going through a situation.
The only one going through a situation. Mm-hmm.
For me, it was lack of touch during COVID.
Lack of touch.
Living alone, physical, like
Mm-hmm.
hugs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those are powerful, aren't they?
Yes, I agree.
Lack of touch. I'm just going to take a couple of notes so I'm remembering everything that you're sharing. This is
Just lack of everything, stuff being taken away because COVID kind of prevented you from going out and
Mhm,
hanging with friends or whatever
mhm.
you wanted.
Yeah.
Not being able to see people's faces.
Mhm. Yeah, someone else just posted that too. Lack of facial expressions, smile due to having masks. Absolutely. And some of us, I know I do this more than I realized until the pandemic. I rely really heavily on reading lips when I'm talking to someone. So I felt a disconnect even when trying to communicate through a mask because I couldn't read their lips. This is a good list, and I appreciate those of you that are comfortable to share, either through the chat or unmuting yourself. There's one more that was just posted, that lack of meaningful connections to others, even when around or when talking to others. So if I can elaborate on this, Elizabeth, maybe feeling like it wasn't a deep connection that you were having with someone. It was more of a superficial connection. You were just present together, but there wasn't that bond that was taking place. So I'm
And
sure,
oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the debilitating fear of being around others, increase the loneliness, fear of
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, kind of how we've been conditioned over the last few years, and how we really look at that social connection. Definitely. So I'm curious to learn if any of you have felt lonely in the last 3 weeks. If you're comfortable, you can raise your hand. You can share something in the chat if you've had those feelings of loneliness, like someone doesn't understand what you're going through, or you're feeling like you just haven't been able to have that connection with a person, maybe feeling empty, just really disconnected and alone and isolated.
Most of mine has been work related. I think a lot of people since COVID have really returned back to work, not in the spirit of, and you kind of left by yourself. Like, hey, listen, am I the only one working here, or is someone else doing something? Where's everyone else?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See, I haven't been feeling lonely too much since basically we can go out more and see people's faces. But when COVID was happening, like in 2020, I was like, I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just stopped.
Yeah, that kind of feeling of panic almost, right? When not being able to be out with folks, and just that constant anxiety that can bring. And when you talk about work, some people aren't going back into the office. And so there's that loneliness for folks that may not have that connection outside anymore. So maybe they were working in person before, but now not working in person. And so those feelings of loneliness and that isolation can really start to grow. And just really sharing and hearing from you all. We're going to talk more about some of these experiences that you've had in just a bit. But for those of you that are feeling alone right now, or you're feeling lonely right now, know that you're not alone with these feelings. It's still an incredibly common feeling that so many are living with. And really, many of us, a portion of us have gone back to life pre-pandemic, but some of us haven't moved in that direction yet. So again, just know that you're not alone with those feelings. So as I was preparing this material for you, I kind of reflected on what my own experiences have been, but I also turned to Webster and looked for the definition of lonely. And so Webster defines it as being without company, or cut off from others, not frequented by human beings, sad from being alone, and producing a feeling of bleakness or desolation. And so when you hear the emotions that you all have just shared, as well as the definition, it can really start to paint a picture of how this can be harmful to us, both emotionally as well as with other implications. So since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, way back into March of 2020, I think it's really fair to assume that we've all experienced just a roller coaster of emotions. We've experienced a lot from fear, which we just talked about. One of you mentioned feeling fearful of being out in public or around people. We've experienced a great amount of concern and worry. We've experienced grief, whether we're grieving the loss of an individual, someone that's passed away. We're grieving our pre-pandemic life. We're grieving just a change in routine, change in society, not being with people. We've experienced adjustment, loss, hope, frustration, and really just a multitude of churning emotions. And so very much so a roller coaster of an experience. When you have a decrease in social activity or social interaction, what you typically see is an increase in loneliness. And loneliness was actually first identified in the 1950s by a psychiatrist named Frida from Reichman. And I don't encourage you to try to say that name 3 times fast. But she defines loneliness in the same way that many of you just shared, is that loneliness is a result of a disconnect. It's a disconnect between a person's expectations and a person's reality. It's a disconnect between what is and isn't being met to fulfill those emotional needs that we have. And really that being disconnected from the community on a social as well as an emotional level. So when you see or you experience a disconnect or a decrease in that social activity, what you're likely going to see is an increase in loneliness. And you'll most likely see a decrease in physical activity as well. And this is simply just because when we're around other people, we move more. It's just some facts that we know that we're more physically active when we're spending time with others. And with that then comes an increase of complications, one of which is depression. And so as you can see, these challenges triggered by the decrease in connections are fueling a lot of different areas that really attribute to our overall well-being. So let's look at some of the other reasons why feelings of loneliness can be really harmful to us as an individual. For a really long time, we've been observing and witnessing what is called a loneliness epidemic. And this was research that was done back in 2017. And so what was found is that in ways that loneliness can impact our physical health. And these statistics are actually pretty staggering in terms of how else these feelings of loneliness can affect us. So we know that about 43% of adults feel lonely on a regular basis. And this is also, keep in mind, from 2017. So this is pre-pandemic statistics here. 85% of young adults feel lonely on a daily basis. There's an increased risk of heart disease with loneliness. There's an increased risk of death. It's also been found that loneliness is more dangerous than obesity, and it's also as damaging as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So why is this important for us to talk about? Why do we need to know these statistics? Why is it important to hear about these other health factors in response to loneliness? And really, I wanted this information in here because as people that are supporting others, I want you to be aware of the potential challenges that can arise for people who are sharing that they're feeling lonely or they're sharing that they're feeling isolated, as well as if you're having these same feelings as well. Yeah,
To comment on that, when you're lonely, you probably smoke more and you probably eat more also.
probably. And then you're not moving anymore either, right? So it's kind of like this downward spiral or a domino effect that one really fuels the other. And the more that it happens, the more that you're fueling all of those other areas. So yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on there.
Erin,
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else is having a problem, but your slides are, they're not fully on the screen, like they're
Oh,
cutting off. Does then,
is that better?
oh yeah, for me. Yep. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for telling me. If for some reason it goes back, just let me know, please. All right, so let's keep kind of moving through here. So really, when we're looking at these factors and really, talking about ways to support others, again, it's just really important to know what some of the other potential factors may be for folks. So people are lonely for other reasons than just the pandemic. I think that loneliness really, the pandemic really pushed that loneliness on us when we had those stay-at-home orders that were impacted, and it really advanced these feelings. However, many people were already feeling lonely before the pandemic started, and many people are feeling lonely as this pandemic continues to kind of wear on, but we've resumed some areas of normalcy. So really, the pandemic isn't just the only reason why there's feelings of loneliness or feelings as though we have decrease in friendships. But we know that when someone is living with a disability, whether it's intellectual, developmental, physical, visible, or invisible, one reason is when you feel bad physically, it's almost instinctual to isolate yourself. And this happens when this happens for too long, loneliness can really start to set in. So even though isolating yourself is really a tempting strategy to cope with the world and avoid maybe feelings of hurt or that physical pain that you may be experiencing, isolation isn't really a healthy coping mechanism, according to a lot of research that has been done. Some of us like to be alone and we thrive with that ample alone time. Some of us, our batteries are refueled and recharged when we're with others. For some of us that are more introverted, our batteries are fueled and recharged when we have that time to spend alone. But really, when we spend too much time alone, it can lead to those damaging short and long-term side effects, like we just talked about from that study in 2017. So alone time that evolves into loneliness can really result in us feeling less than human and promote negative feelings. The side effects are really magnified for people that are living with a variety of different types of disabilities. And because of limited opportunities to engage in social and emotional relationships, people that are living with an intellectual or developmental disability often report higher feelings of loneliness than those that are living without. We know that people's social circles are considerably smaller as well, really looking at about 3.1 individuals on the average of someone that is living with some type of disability, compared to someone that has a social circle of an average of 25 people that's living without a disability. And that number really was quite staggering for me to hear that. And those numbers are pre-pandemic as well. So you have to consider that might actually be smaller now. So we've talked about what loneliness is. You've did a great job in defining that together, sharing some of those examples that you have with it. We've talked about why is it important to know what that is? It's important to know what some of those further health complications are that can really contribute to overall decline in those 7 dimensions of health and well-being. So how do we work to help decrease these feelings of loneliness and move towards a better well-being? Well, we do it together by being together, whether that's in person, it's over the phone, or it's virtually, but we have to make an effort together, because those short and long-term effects of loneliness, while not feeling good, they're also really alarming, and know that much worse could happen in the future. So I want to take a look at some ways to decrease these feelings of loneliness. And there are some really easy ways that we're able to do this. And so the first is to practice self-kindness and to really encourage others to do it too. So when you're experiencing a difficult moment, it's essential to practice self-kindness. If we're blaming ourselves when we feel lonely about being lonely, that's not helpful. So really looking at limiting our own hurtful self-talk and looking at ways that we can take care of ourselves differently, or in general, just give yourself a break. We know that when we practice hurtful self-talk to ourselves, our brain can't really distinguish the difference, even if we may be saying it sarcastically, but our brain and our body absorb that, and we hold on to those statements, those negative feelings, and that can really begin to grow. So it's really important to practice self-kindness. So if you're feeling that way, or you're supporting someone who maybe not be saying the nicest things to themselves, encourage them to practice self-kindness and just really kind of giving themselves a break. So some examples you can do physically to help with self-kindness is get outside, take a walk, maybe a walk in nature, maybe it's just a walk around the block. But it really can be helpful for getting yourself into a self-kindness type of mood. I've found for myself that just a short walk outside can really shift my mindset from negative to more positive, or more open to interactions. Looking at grooming. So you could choose to brush your teeth with a smile on your face. Maybe it's singing in the shower, but really looking at grooming, because when we take care of our bodies, we start to feel better as well. Looking at rest. So rest is really vital for the mind as well as the body. And so when we need to rest, our minds tell us that we don't have the energy necessary for something. And so we need to take a break to recharge those batteries. Looking at water intake. There's a great book called You're Not Sick, You're Dehydrated. And it's really, really powerful. So even if you think you don't need water, you probably do. So encouraging folks to stay hydrated can really help with that mental outlook. Some of you, if you're like me, you might have a hard time asking for help. But if you have a hard time or you feel overwhelmed, ask for some help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength to be able to admit when you're in need of some help. Encourage you to let go. So letting go of negativity that isn't serving you. You can start with something as simple as a grudge towards someone that may have hurt you in the past. There are some additional things that you can say or that you can do or say to yourself, to help you feel supported and to practice some self-kindness. But I'm curious, what are some things that you all may say to yourself or say to others to help you feel a little bit better? Practice some of that self-kindness.
My faith.
Your faith, absolutely.
I talk to friends
Good.
that I trust.
That's a key factor right there too. Affirmation statements, that's wonderful. What would you say go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I treat myself to a pay-per-view movie, a comedy.
I love it. I love it. That's wonderful.
For me, it's hard to trust people. So
Mm-hmm.
I go to people that I can trust.
Good. And what would you say to a friend who maybe was making not kind statements about themselves?
stop doing it.
Exactly. And so we also have to practice what we preach with that too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes I just get frustrated, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
After I get that out, I'm fine.
Good. Good. Sometimes we just have to get it out, vent it out, or, get rid of the negative to be able to make room for the good. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Another way that we can help decrease those feelings of aloneness or loneliness, is to capitalize on the present moment. So when you feel good about something, share it with others right away. And I don't mean share by just posting something on social media, but really looking at finding ways to share that good with those people that you trust, of course. So tell me, how do you share good news?
Text message,
Text message. Perfect.
Messenger.
Messenger. Great.
Facebook.
Good. How else do you share good news?
Tell a friend.
Tell a friend. Great. Facebook. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a picture can say 1,000 words, right? And so you take a picture of something, that's great, and be able to share that out. That's wonderful. You definitely shared by saying that you could call or text a friend. And really, I want you to keep in mind that the positive things that you can share, they don't have to be the big things, right? You could simply just have woken up on the right side of the bed and think, hey, I'm feeling really good today, and I want to tell somebody that I'm feeling good. And so by sharing these moments, you really create small moments of savoring and connection that can happen with others. And these are ways that can help you to overcome those feelings of loneliness. And it can also help open the door for connecting with others who may be feeling lonely, and encourage them to do the same thing. So absolutely, being in the moment and sharing those little bits of good news with others. When we're looking at ways to decrease those feelings of loneliness, another way that can help is to connect in real life. And so this might seem like an obvious statement, but connecting in real life may not be as easy as it once was. And there are several factors that can go into that, whether it's comfort, are you comfortable being out in public with others? Availability of people to meet. Cost is certainly an issue for a lot of people right now, transportation, etc. But when we're face to face with people, it really tends to improve our mood, and it can help to reduce depression. Activities that involve other people are also likely to have really positive effects on our mental health. So finding ways to be around more people more, right? That's kind of what we're here to talk about. But what are some ways that you like to connect with people? What are some things that you like to do? And then the third question to that is, are there ways that you're missing being able to spend time with people? You can throw something in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to share.
For me, it's people. For me, I'm in a wheelchair, if you can't tell. So just being able to go places is not as easy anymore.
Sure.
Because they're closed for dine-in or whatever the case.
Mm-hmm.
There's not lack of public places.
Gotcha.
So I reach out maybe to video chat or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And just email my boyfriend or my friend and
Yeah.
just talk.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not face to face, but
you're still getting some eye connection by doing a video chat.
yeah.
Doug says attending Toastmaster meetings regularly, even around the world meetings, and meeting new cultures. That's great. Are there other areas and ways that you like to connect with people, or ways that you're really missing?
In Howell, Michigan, we have the Melon Fest and the Pink Festival in different activities, but those have been still on hold. They haven't reopened. to, in person.
Mhm.
I just went to Cass County Fair yesterday, so went to have some fun.
Good. There are a lot of things that are opening up again, but there's still a lot of things that haven't fully reopened yet.
Right.
I know a lot of centers are still not fully open. A lot of dine-in restaurants. There's just a lot of changes that continue to happen. Looks like there's a few other items that have been posted in the chat. So hanging around people and talking with people while shopping or playing cards,
Internet
FaceTiming someone that lives out of the area. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Internet gaming.
Internet gaming, great, yes.
I like that idea about Toastmasters was a good idea. And even related to that, joining a support group. And I tell myself to keep reaching out, even though, maybe sometimes I feel like people don't reach out to me. I like to offer the advice as a peer support to continue to reach out. And I hope that pays off sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes that reaching out to others when they're not reaching out to you, that can make you feel a little vulnerable, right? But knowing that maybe someone else needs that encouragement, and if you're comfortable doing that, that's a wonderful way to be able to connect with folks as well.
The alternative. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to follow up. The alternative, for me, if I don't reach out, I'm not going to be able to change someone and make them reach out to me. So that's my thought, is just to keep reaching out, and as long as I could keep that positive attitude and feel good, then I think it's working.
Mm-hmm. There is certainly something when we're able to be face to face with someone, and really looking at ways that we can decrease that loneliness that folks are feeling. Someone mentioned at the beginning, you missed hugs, and not having hugs or lack of touch was something. So when we're face to face, we're able to engage with that. But something else, even if you are chatting with folks virtually, being able to see someone face to face and looking the person in their eyes, listening, being mindful, really, and being focused and engaged in that conversation. Someone else shared earlier feelings that the connections weren't maybe as strong or as I don't want to completely paraphrase or take out of context, but they didn't feel as though the connections were a deep connection. They felt maybe a little bit more superficial. So really looking at those ways and some ways that we can help to strengthen and deepen some of those connections. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. So another way to kind of rethink the way that we're spending our spare time, and another way that you can really work to decrease loneliness and enhance your overall well-being. When we feel lonely, sometimes we just want to retreat into a corner and hide. And other times we may feel really tired because we've had a long or busy day, and we're just too tired to be social. We're mentally tapped, if you will. But opting to stay alone every night with our phones, watching Netflix or playing on Facebook, it can really get us stuck in this feeling of loneliness. And so we've created this life for ourselves that deprives us of that meaningful social connection. And really one of the only ways that we're able to get out of it is to start living a little bit differently. And so thinking about how we're spending our spare time in a different way. If we instead use our loneliness to motivate us to reach out to people, then we can really look at and work at strengthening our friendships. By opting to cope with our loneliness by seeking out social support, we can create more social moments with the people in our lives, really with those that matter to us, which usually can help to reduce that loneliness. So just like you said, reaching out to those individuals and being the one that's reaching out to them to be that support. So using that motivation to help someone else can actually benefit us just as much. So it's really important that we encourage ourselves and others to do this. It's a really easy trap for us to fall into. And sometimes we don't even realize that it's happening as it's happening. How many of you are using social media? It sounds like quite a few of you are using social media. You can raise a hand, throw a yes in the chat. I've heard several folks kind of mention it already. If you're someone who does, or you're doing lots of online groups, I want to encourage you to be active online instead of just surfing the internet or scrolling through social media. If you're wanting to go online, opt instead to do something that involves the active participation of other people. So for example, you could play games with one another. You could chat, you could give advice in a forum, or having that video call, that FaceTime experience with someone. And so the more that you're interacting with others online, the more connected that you're really going to start to feel with that. Along with this, I want to encourage you to share for real online. So somewhere along the way, that word sharing got co-opted on social media to describe what's really just kind of humble bragging. So we post about cool things that we've done. We post about good meals that we've eaten or a fun party that we went to, all the things that we didn't really actually share with the people who are viewing our posts. So instead of posting about things you did, really, I want to encourage you to reclaim the word share for what it really means. And so to give a small or large portion of what's important to someone else. So you could share words of support for someone. You could share a funny joke, or maybe you share something that you might be struggling with, and really looking at finding ways to shift that focus off of us, but onto others and what we can do to help support others that may be struggling with this as well. There we go. So I want to also encourage you to be kind to your mind. So I'll share some ways that can help you to feel less lonely, is to find ways to stop those negative thought cycles that may be occurring within you. And so really, we might repeatedly think about what we could have done differently to prevent ourselves from feeling so lonely, or we might ponder the events, or really kind of be fixated on the events or people or causes, because we mistakenly believe that thinking about our own loneliness over and over again is going to help us solve it, but it's not going to help us to solve it. And this does us no good to get kind of stuck in our own heads, if you will. But really, it prevents us from taking the actions that we need, the actions that we have to really help us to feel better. And so to put an end to these really negative thought cycles, it's a good idea to take action or to do something different that stops these thoughts and these changes are and thoughts and changes really our experience of the world. So for example, if I'm feeling lonely, maybe I'll go for a walk and see what's happening at the center if I'm close to it, or that can help. But really looking also at ways to be kind to our mind, and really it's an easy way to remember to help us to kind of shift from being stuck in our heads to doing. So I'm curious, because I think it's just human nature for us all to get easily stuck in our minds. What are some ways that you might want to shift that from those negative thoughts and focus on doing something different? What are some things that you all do?
Listen to music.
Listen to music. Great. That's a great way to kind of shift your mood. What else might you do?
Talk to a friend.
Good. Yep, absolutely.
Get
There's a
together
lot
and
of
play music with friends.
I'm sorry, what was that? Listening to music with friends?
Get together and play music with friends.
Ah, yes, absolutely. Not only are you being social, you're also doing something, and music can be really, really powerful for so many people. Are there other areas, or are there other things that you might do physically that can help you to kind of shift that focus?
Yeah, that's very problematic, Erin, is being stuck in, when I'm stuck in my head, trying to get out. I appreciate you asking, because I'm open to ideas. Exercise, like you said, walking, just breaking through that first barrier is sometimes difficult. It's like trying to get out is, I don't know. It's very difficult sometimes to be stuck in your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think that we can be our own worst enemies when we are stuck in our heads. And so when we first start to, what's important is to notice some of those triggers of when that may start. And so sometimes it can be some of that negative self-talk that's happening, where we can start to get stuck in our head, and that's kind of triggers a rumination effect, if you will, where we just really kind of focus on all the things that we could have done differently. And so doing something physically to allow us to be kind to our minds is something that can be really just impactful for folks. Sometimes it's doing some breathing exercises even that can help you to really be able to kind of break through that and just pause those thoughts and be able to move forward.
Writing down things that you're thankful for.
Absolutely. Journaling is a great way to do that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that positive journaling, gratitude journaling, writing down those things that you might be thankful for, really kind of shifting that focus of not from what we don't have to what we do have, and being really grateful for that. That's an excellent idea. Some people like to make something called a gratitude jar. And so, and they'll do things like each day, at the end of the day, they'll write down something that they were grateful for, something that happened that day. And it's different every day. That's kind of the caveat of this, is that it's something different. So it's not just I'm thankful for something basic or general that you may experience every day, but something very different, those small moments that you can focus on and putting them into a jar. On those days where we're stuck in our heads, or we're having a hard time thinking, gosh, I don't have anything to be grateful for today or in this moment, you have this full jar full of all of these amazing things that have happened, and you can go back and you can reread some of those items, and it actually turns into a really fun reminiscing time that you kind of reflect back on those moments that you've had either with yourself or with others. Does that sound helpful to anybody? Yeah. All right. Great. Great. And as I'm sharing this, I feel like we may have skipped a slide, so just bear with me here. So really looking at I missed part of what I was wanting to say with the shift, the focus. When we're on social media, when we're seeing that humble bragging of others, really that shifts our focus into those items that we don't have, or those things that we might be missing out on. Someone gets a new car, someone goes on vacation, someone has a really nice date, and it can really start to shift the way that we're seeing that world. We see unrealistic figures of women that are photoshopped, and this image of perfection, and we can really begin to feel envious of that. And as a result, we may become increasingly focused on how we aren't measuring up to those individuals. So again, shifting that focus of what you can give to someone else. So sharing those things, there's a lot of science behind the gift of something called altruism, which is giving to others. And so there's so much that we can find, and so much more that benefit that can happen, because the person that is the giver actually gets more than what you're giving to someone else. So another way that you can help to kind of shift that focus, shift in ways to kind of get out of your own head, is to stop focusing on you, but do something for someone else. And it doesn't have to be huge. It can be something really pretty small. I'm curious, are there ways that you like to give to other people?
Say hi or help them out with something.
Yeah, say hi, help them out, give a compliment.
Pick a little bouquet of flowers and put it on their front porch.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I swept a gutter one time for my mom's neighbor and I just felt good about it and I didn't get a thank you. I mean, it's not like they weren't thankful, but I'm just saying I didn't hear anything, but it just made me feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing that you're doing something for someone else is just that can be just so powerful. And especially if you do it when they haven't asked you to do it and you just do it because you see that it needs to be done, even something as simple as holding a door for someone can be really, really powerful.
This is the number.
Sending a short note, things like that can just be really great as well.
733.
I love the note that's posted about the positive thinking, or positive thinking is really great.
You're stationed all over Michigan.
If you aren't talking, would you please mute yourself? The background noise can be a little distracting.
Okay, all right. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yep. And sending small gifts in the mail, ordered masks to send them to friends. Those are wonderful, wonderful ways to be able to help to share out ways or ways to help support other people as well. Great. Wonderful. Keep that up, please. Sorry about the kind of disconnect in slides. So one area that we talked about at the very beginning is that fear of being out with others and, ways that we've really been conditioned over the last 2 years. And so this is something that's called reentry anxiety. And it's an uneasiness about returning to the old normal of maybe school and work, hugs, handshakes, social gatherings, whether they're large or they're small. And really so many people that have been feeling or that meeting with people in public or face-to-face to socialize, they're not comfortable with it. They're feeling really uneasy about it. They may be experiencing quite a bit of anxiety about that as well. Really just being anxious about being in public again, because the pandemic is still happening. There's still this ongoing concern of a virus that, especially if you are an immunocompromised individual, can have some pretty profound implications for you, for us. And so there's that fear of, is it really safe? How do I know that this is safe for me? And so we have to remember also that some people were uncomfortable with being or they are uncomfortable with being in public again. And really, if you or someone is feeling this way, you are not alone in any way, shape, or form with this. As a society, we've been told for so long to be fearful and to be careful and to be cautious of other people. And for us to be really fearful of getting too close to individuals, we have to stay 6 feet apart from everyone because there's this fear of contracting an invisible virus that we can't see coming or going between us. And we've been conditioned to look at the world in this way for a really extended period of time. So it makes sense that some people are feeling really uneasy about this reemergence, this going back to normal as though nothing happened, even though the pandemic is still continuing onward. When we look at integrating back into society, it isn't like just a light switch that can be flipped back on after there's an outage, especially for those folks that may be living with a pre-existing anxiety condition. So they were experiencing anxiety before the pandemic began, or those individuals who may have a tendency to just over worry a lot. We've certainly settled into a new way of life, and certain people may be more susceptible to feeling and becoming socially anxious after being isolated for this long of time. And the pandemic really has created and become a recipe for the onset of a social anxiety disorder. It's really easy to get accustomed to this narrowing of the world and then become overstimulated when it's time for everything to just go back to normal. And so anyone that's ever been in a room that's been really dark for an extended period of time knows that when you walk outside and you're in that bright light again, that can be really disconcerting and really dizzying, right? It's the same feeling for someone that's experiencing this reentry anxiety. So it's important that we acknowledge and that we understand that people's brains and bodies, they're struggling to adjust and to make sense of a new reality. And really, it's important that we find ways to help promote healthy coping and reentry together. And so this continues to be an unprecedented situation, really, for virtually everyone on the planet. Have any of you felt anxious about going back into public, or know someone or support someone that has those feelings as well?
For me, it's difficult. I mean, like my agency's policy is that with consumers, we wear a mask. And so I myself even wear masks into store. And in a way that makes me feel alone, right? Because as soon as they got rid of the mask mandate, people kind of look at you strangely if you're wearing a mask.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
Could I explore an idea? It seems like an appropriate forum about the pandemic, in that it almost lends itself to bring light to the stigma associated with mental illness, in that a lot of people now feel, or a lot of people have now newly experienced feelings that, were exclusive to people with mental illness a little bit, to a certain extent. I'm just trying to explore an idea, but it seems like a very good time for peer support and the stigma for mental illness to really lessen. And there just seems to be a movement out there. And it seems that this pandemic almost lends itself to us moving forward as peers. Does that make sense at all? Is that valid?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one reason that we're seeing such a movement like this is because people have a deeper understanding. They've actually experienced those feelings of loneliness or isolation from others. They've actually experienced that. They're feeling anxious in times where they've never felt anxious before, and that anxiety can be really crippling for them. Same thing with depression. When we look at, there's a survey that's put out by the CDC called the Household Pulse Survey. And what they did every 2 weeks, and it's still happening throughout the pandemic, is that they're measuring the level of self-reported depression and anxiety that people are feeling and experiencing. And it's been at about 40% for our entire state of Michigan throughout this entire time, which is pretty profound, right? That's like 1 in 3 people are reporting that they're feeling a profound amount of depression and anxiety. And while there's a lot more that goes into mental illness, but these are individuals that have never experienced that before. And so, yeah, there's firsthand empathy that folks are seeing and they're experiencing, and they're seeing it with their family members as well. And that is certainly something that's happening. I'm going to ask, if you're not speaking, to please keep yourself muted. That background noise is really, really distracting.
Let me know.
You would, maybe the person that's helping out in the background, you could help with that, monitoring that muting for someone, please. Thank you.
All right, bye.
All right, I'm going to try to keep going. Hopefully that person will stay muted, because again, that's pretty distracting for us. So yes, I think you're absolutely right, is that there is a movement, there is a condition that the rest of the world is starting to understand what these feelings are like, and how how profound they can be and how strongly they can really impact folks. So I think that, yes, it's kind of a both and movement. You know, it's unfortunate that so many other people are experiencing this, but I think that it's really helpful as we continue to build a more inclusive community, and we continue to be able to empathize, and really find new ways to offer supports to everyone and see the world in a little bit of a different way, and hopefully come back being a little bit kinder, because it hasn't always been that way. And there's ways for us to kind of reach out and to help offer support for those individuals and being that mentor, and kind of showing them the ropes about how to now navigate along those lines. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that you are spot on with that.
Thank you for validation. You know, yeah, and you called it some type of movement. I missed a word, Erin. You said it was some kind of Bodian movement or something. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
It wasn't anything profound, I can tell you that much. But really, it was just more of a movement of validation, of support. I'd have to go back to look at exactly what I said.
I think you said both and.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. It's really a movement of both and support and empathy, and individual experience that folks have had. So let's talk about some ways that we can help support either ourselves or others through this reentry anxiety that some folks may be experiencing. So first and foremost is start small. Don't choose to tackle on a large event for your first time out, especially if you're feeling anxious. So really starting small. And so having someone or yourself slowly expose themselves to the things that you've been avoiding. And you can do different things to help you manage your anxiety as you're doing that. Some relaxation exercises that are positive for you. One that I think is really easy that folks will do is something called square breathing or box breathing. And it's where you breathe in for 4, you hold your breath for 4, you exhale for 4, and you pause for 4. And you can continue to do it, but it makes a nice box as you go through and do that. You want to offer to be a companion to someone as they head out into public, or helping them face that situation. Or if you're the one that's experiencing that, I will encourage you to not do it alone. Ask for a companion to go with you. This has to be a person of trust. So it can't be someone that's brand new or someone that you haven't met before. It really needs to be someone that you trust and that is a good friend to you. Want to encourage you to filter incoming information. So this is another key step, and it's important to be in the know. But what we've seen with the news, especially in the last 2 years, is that it can create a lot of anxiety for folks and not always providing accurate information. So really kind of filter where you're getting your information from, how much time you're spending listening to the news can certainly help with you as you're looking to re-enter out into the public and with others. Even though we know that it's safe, it's okay to have a different set of comfort with new norms, and that it's okay to set boundaries. So one of you shared that you're still wearing a mask when you're going to the grocery store. I think that's great. That's a wonderful boundary that you've put in place for yourself, that, hey, I'm not totally comfortable with this and I'm going to continue to wear a mask. Wearing a mask, even when you're spending time with folks outside, we know that that's still considered safe, but if you're not comfortable with it, that's okay. Do what makes you feel comfortable with that. Skip the concerts, the crowded kind of hot spots, if you will, and build up to those larger events by going at a pace that you can tolerate. So going to smaller gatherings before you go to something that may be larger. I want to encourage to be patient. So whether that's patient with yourself or patient with the individual, we know that the anticipation of an event is worse than the actual event for the person. So again, really being patient with that, really having patience with yourself or the individual, because that lead up time is when you feel the most anxiety that can happen. want to encourage some lifestyle modifications. And we talked about some of these a little bit already, but looking at making sure that you're getting good physical activity, exercise, eating a healthier diet, trying to refrain from sugar if you're having heightened periods of anxiety, making sure that your sleep is remaining pretty consistent, and then also look at those triggers. So what are the triggers that are causing anxiety for you, as well as following a good routine. We know that staying in a routine can just be really, really helpful for ourselves. And lastly is a way that something that you can do physically. So when we're feeling anxious, what we tend to do is to protect our upper body. And this is because this is where our heart and our lungs are located. So we'll do this by kind of hunching over. But for an immediate and physical antidote, a natural reaction is I want to encourage you to just sit upright, pull your shoulders back, stand or sit with your feet apart, kind of open your chest. And so what this does is it tells your body, and your body starts to sense that it's back in control. And so you're not being hunched over, but you're taking control again. And so those are just a couple of ways that you can really help with that reentry anxiety as you start to kind of proceed forward. Now, one area, well, not one area, but really over the last 2 years, I've heard a lot of people say, I don't have many friends anymore, or I must not be a good friend to folks. And really, our feelings of loneliness can stem from that feeling of not being a good friend, not having many friends right now, and really being fixated on those reasons why you may not have as many friends, or why you may not be a good friend, or spending spare time alone all the time, maybe not talking kindly or positive to ourselves, and or really only looking at those highlight reels on social media. So this is an activity that you can do either independently, or you can do with those that you're supporting that may be sharing that they're feeling this way. And given time, we won't be able to do this full activity together, but I'll send the slides and you'll be able to have this to take with you. But the activity is pretty simple in that you can either trace your hand on a piece of paper or just use your hand, and you list out 5 examples of what might make you a good friend. So 5 things, and I have a couple on this slide here. So I'm kind, I'm honest, I'm a good listener, I keep my promises, and I like to help. So just listing those 5 things, and they can be similar to this if you identify with that, or it can be very different in what makes you a good friend. But listing those out, kind of writing those down, similar to a journaling effect that some may have. Another thing that you can do also is if you're feeling like you could be a better friend to someone, you can do the example in the same way that we just talked about, either tracing your hand out or using your hand to kind of go through those items. But it's certainly something that you can do. Can take it with you anywhere because your hand's always connected. But it's a great way that you can share and do this with others. If someone is saying that maybe they're not feeling like a good friend, you could say to them why they're a good friend to you. So pointing out some of those other items, and again, looking at ways that we can really be more supportive and more kind to one another. So to conclude, and what I really hope that you take with you today is a greater understanding of how loneliness and feelings of being alone are really very important, and how it can impact all of these 7 dimensions of these 7 areas of well-being, or these 7 dimensions of health, if you will. I hope that you have found that the tips for ways to feel less lonely are helpful for you and for those that you're providing support to. We have to remember that not everyone is comfortable being together in the same space, and that we have to continue to find ways to adjust because of the pandemic. But as long as we're working together, as long as we're striving to live in a world that's more inclusive and that's more open to these social connections, I think that we can make a really great great path forward with all of that. So I want to thank you first and foremost for joining. Secondly, for really sharing and being open and vulnerable. I really appreciate that. My email address is listed here. If you have questions in the future or you want to connect, please don't hesitate to email me. I would love to connect with you. But at this time, if there are any last minute questions or anything that any of you would like to share, I'd like to open up the floor for that. All right, well, we've got silence here, so I think that means that there are no questions, but if something pops up in the future and you'd like to chat, again, I'm all ears. The StayWell program is always looking at new supports and new services that we can offer to folks. Some of you mentioned having some type of a support group, and if you feel that a support group for peer mentors is something that would be helpful for you, that's certainly something that we can look into being able to offer and being able to support. So again, anything that we can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm so glad that you were able to join today. I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day. It's nice and hot and sunny here in West Michigan, so hopefully it is for you where you are too. And for those of you, I'll be presenting tomorrow as well with a different topic and would love to see some faces again. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.